This is Christina Shala, and welcome to another episode of Empowering the Educator Within. Today, we're going to take a look at the planning tools required to ensure that the environment at a school truly becomes the third teacher. To fully understand the concepts being covered in this video, I highly recommend that you first check out the Individualized Planners video before watching this video. Before getting started, I'd just like to mention that the planners that are going to be shown in this video do not attach to a specific framework. They can be altered and adjusted based on a school's vision, core goals, and supporting goals. Let's say that a school is interested in implementing some sort of play-based approach. And as such, their supporting goals are as follows. Firstly, they would like to ensure that the environment becomes the third teacher. And not just in a single classroom, but they would like for this concept to extend in the hallways and also to the outdoor spaces. Their second goal is to ensure evolving spaces, meaning that it's not about just setting up a space one time, but they would like for them to continuously evolve and change based on inquiries or topics being covered in classrooms. And lastly, they would like for it to be objectives-based, meaning that whatever is set up in the classroom environments or hallways or outdoor spaces has a clear connect to subject area objectives. So making connections to language arts, math, specialist subjects, etc. With these supporting goals in mind, designing a traditional planner is simply not going to help the school in achieving its vision or its goals. And this is because traditional planners have days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. While the school really isn't interested in seeing lesson plans that are day by day broken down, because the kids are interacting with spaces and it's going to be more of an organic learning experience, not a set day-by-day experience for the students. Also, if you're going to be designing spaces that are meeting objectives and you don't have the room on your planner to actually map where you're going to put things out, it's not really conducive. You're not going to be able to meet the school's goals as a teacher because you don't have the planning space to do so. Also, traditional planners don't include specialists and support staff. And if you're not including these teachers in this approach of making the school or the whole school where the environment is the third teacher, if you're not including these staff in this, you're not actually taking a whole school approach to this. And lastly, traditional planners often don't have spaces to note observations. And if teachers don't have spaces to note observations and what's working well, what isn't in the spaces, or how interests are shifting, then the spaces won't evolve. Or if they do evolve, there's going to be a disconnect. So what are the consequences of not designing the proper planning tools? Well, first of all, the school isn't going to be able to meet its supporting goals. You cannot achieve those goals unless you have the path forward for doing so. Secondly, you're not going to be able to implement a whole school approach because the specialist teachers and the support staff are excluded. They don't really know how they can support the school in their vision of turning the environment into the third teacher. You also end up with chopped timeframes. And so if your goal is to let spaces sort of evolve at their own pace based on student interest, and you're giving set time frames, the two don't match up. And then lastly, you're going to end up with spaces that aren't being used in the way that the school maybe would like them to be used. If teachers aren't thinking about the hallways, or they're not thinking about the outdoor spaces while they're doing their planning, then those spaces have a less likelihood of transforming into what the school has envisioned. With that said, how do you imagine you would design the planners to help the school? So today I'm going to go over a few planners that I've designed, and just keep in mind that they're not the only way. I'll just go over some of the key things that you want to consider when designing a planner for the objective of ensuring that the environment becomes the third teacher in all areas of the school. And so I'll show you an example of a mainstream teacher planner that I designed, and one that sort of, I'll break it into two parts, but I'll go over how the specialist teachers were included, showing an example of how the modern foreign languages teacher was included, and then also show how support staff was included. Let's take a look at a mainstream planner first. In order to help a school achieve the vision of transforming its environment so that it becomes the third teacher, there needs to be some sort of process in place for the teachers to follow, so that as they go through the steps, they just are naturally planning in a way that allows this to happen. And so you'll notice that I've broken this particular planner into a 6-step process. So the first step, you'll note in the first column, is for subject descriptors. And I'm going to use math as the example, but it's the same for, all the other subject areas, whether it be language arts, science, whatever. So what would happen is a teacher would start first off by listing in math, maybe what the unit is, or the topic of inquiry, or what the students are curious about in this box. Now, if you'll recall, the second supporting goal of the school was to ensure that it was objectives-based, meaning that teachers aren't just setting up anything in their environment. Sure, it may look good, but it actually has to help students in achieving certain subject area goals. So that second column there is where teachers would need to think, okay, so this is what students are curious about, or this is what our unit is. What specific objectives do I want to hit in this space? Once they list objectives, then it moves on to brainstorming provocations and materials. And, maybe some of them will be used, some of them not, but they'll start thinking about, what do I need to place in the space in order for students to achieve these objectives. From there, the fourth step is to figure out classroom space. So that means within your defined spaces in your room, which area does the teacher feel like this math space would best be suited with the materials that they want to place there. And they can kind of draw a little picture or something, map it out to help them get a visual. Once they've done this for each subject area, so language arts, math, science, social, then you'll notice the bottom of the planner, I kind of cut it short so that it fits, But imagine a big space at the bottom for teachers to take a look at their whole classroom and actually map out, all right, in this space that I'm designing, language arts objectives are going to be met. In this space that I'm designing, math objectives are going to be met. And once they've mapped out the whole classroom, well, then the students come and, they're gonna interact with these spaces. And as the teacher is observing student interactions, they can be noting in that last column sort of reflection notes or observations about how things are working. Are students actually, as they're engaging with the materials set out, are they meeting objectives? Do they need to be extended? Are they still curious about the inquiries that are being pursued? Are their focuses shifting? If so, where to? And that's where they place all of this in the last column. And once they feel like, things need to change and transform, and evolve based on what's happening in the classroom, that's when they can pull out the next planning sheet. And so as you can see, there is no specific timeline. There's not like by the end of 2 weeks, the whole classroom needs to be changed. It might be that as the students are engaging with the different spaces, it might be that the language arts one, maybe a few things can be added to that particular space. The students are still interested. There's still things that can be, taught and learned from that space. Whereas the math one, the students are done with it. Focus is shifting. That one can be changed entirely. And so it's a complete organic process without timelines. Objectives are being met. And in this way, the school's supporting goals can be realized. Now, that said, as mentioned, this is not the only way of designing a planner to meet the objective of transforming the environment into the third teacher. But in whatever you do, there needs to be a clear process for teachers to be able to transform their spaces, to brainstorm ideas, and to map out where they want to place things. Moving on to the specialist planner. There's two scenarios at a school. There's the first scenario where a specialist teacher has their own space, for example, a gym teacher. In this case, you can simply give them a similar planning template to the one the mainstream teacher uses, because the thought process is the same. Just instead of a mainstream classroom, it's now happening in the gym. But then there's the second scenario where, for example, a modern foreign language teacher may not have their own classroom space. They might be one of those floating teachers where they're popping in from class to class, giving language lessons. In which case, what do you do? How do you incorporate them in the school's vision? And one way of doing this is what I've illustrated here on this planner. If you take a look at the bottom row, it's for the MFL teacher. And the way that it works is the classroom teachers do their planning first. So let's say the foreign language teacher supports 4 different, classrooms in delivering language lessons. Those teachers complete their planners. They hand them over to the modern foreign language teacher, who then completes that bottom row. And I forgot to mention, but those classroom teachers would stop at the step where they're just brainstorming classroom spaces. They would stop there, and then the modern foreign language teacher would meet with each teacher and then figure out where they're going to insert their space on the actual, on step 5 there, where you draw out the entire classroom. they would figure out where the best spot for the modern foreign language teacher to place their materials would be. And so what happens is, let's say the foreign language teacher is providing lessons once a week. They come in, they teach the language that they would like the kids to learn, and then they point out the space that they've created and just show what's available there, and maybe give some ideas of maybe how the space could be used as the students explore it. And in that way, there's actually no definite stop or start time to their lessons. It's a continuous organic process where kids throughout the weeks are reviewing those vocabulary words that they've learned during their lesson. And not only are they reviewing it, but they're kind of putting them into use while playing with each other. And in that way, the modern foreign language teacher helps the school in realizing their vision because, number one, they've contributed to the environment. Number two, whatever they've left in the space is objective-based. And then number three, their space is organic. It will evolve throughout the year as different inquiries take place. Now, you could envision the modern foreign language teacher as sort of a standalone, but you could also, if the school wanted to take things a step further, they could actually have the modern foreign language teacher tying into the inquiries that are taking place perhaps in language, math, or science. That's just another alternative that can be done using a planner like this. Again, not the only way, but as long as the modern foreign language teacher or a floating specialist has a way to connect to the classroom and leave materials in a space, they will be contributing to helping the school ensure that the environment truly is the third. And finally, we get to the support staff. Now, in order to assist a school in truly making sure that each student has the opportunity to interact with the environment and for the environment to be, accessible to all the students, certain things need to take place. And so in designing a planner that's similar to the mainstream planner, but that has additional columns for support staff, this can happen. And so the process is as follows. The classroom teacher would first complete their planner, the one that does not have the additional columns for support staff. Then the support staff would take that information and begin their planning. So they would take a look at the objectives that the classroom teacher has set out and decide which ones are ones that their students could work towards. Or they could also figure out different objectives for their students that may also be in line with topics that might be covered or inquiries, but that would just be modified for their students. And once they've figured out how they're going to plug in, then they would design materials that are adapted for their students. And now when it comes out to planning the classroom spaces, they would plug in to the same areas that the teachers have planned out, only they would put their differentiated materials or scaffolded materials in those areas in addition to the ones that the classroom teacher sets out. So it could be that it's color-coded differently, could be that the materials are placed in different boxes. In any way that the support staff decides to do it, it just needs to be obvious which ones are for the students, the majority of the kids, and which ones are designed for the students that they support. And in this way, the environment truly does become accessible for all students. And again, this is not the only way to go about doing this. However, in whatever planning tools you do design, if you want support staff to be helping the school achieve its vision of ensuring that the environment becomes the third teacher, there needs to be a way for support staff to plug into what's happening in the classroom. While the planners that I showed outline ways for the individual teachers in their individual spaces to help the school in achieving its goals, they don't address how hallway spaces would be created or how outdoor spaces would be created. And so in the next sets of planners that I'm going to show you, I'll illustrate how this can be done. If a school is wanting teachers to think outside their classroom spaces and into how hallways can be used as a way to guide students in their learning, then you actually need to include somewhere on the planner for teachers to note their ideas on how to do so. And so I've shown one way of doing this in this mainstream planner. And as you can see, there's an additional column where teachers would need to brainstorm ideas of how the hallway space could be used to reinforce concepts being taught in the classroom. Now, the column extends to multiple subject areas, but that doesn't necessarily mean that whatever the teacher sets up outside the classroom would have to hit everything. Maybe they feel like putting out a space that will just tie into language arts, and that would be fine. Not only does the planner allow for them to brainstorm how they would link into the hallway spaces, but there's also on that bottom row, it splits into half, one for mapping out the classroom space and one for mapping out the hallway space, so they can brainstorm how the materials would be set out and what this would look like. And then in the observation column, not only would teachers be required to note observations of how things were evolving in their classroom spaces, but also in the hallway spaces. And in this way, the hallway space can evolve just as organically as the classroom spaces. Now, the school could take a look at this planning tool one of two ways. It might be that individual hallway spaces outside the different classrooms are disconnected. Or it might be that the school encourages, for example, all the grade 1 teachers to meet together and figure out how they collaboratively could design those spaces outside their classrooms so that multiple classes of students could use those spaces. And perhaps one classroom would be in charge of language arts, one in charge of math, just depending on the unit of inquiry or the topics being covered. And again, they would need to figure out where there are overlaps as each class might be pursuing different inquiries. So again, either way would work, but what's important to note is that if you're going to require teachers to use the classroom or the hallway spaces, there needs to be a spot on their planner that actually allows them to do so. And now we get to how a school can ensure that its outdoor spaces are also being used and incorporated in students' learning. And this needs to be a whole school collaborative process, because whether it be the specialists or the mainstream teachers, they need to come to a consensus about who's going to get which area of the playground and when and how this is all going to evolve and shift over time. And so you'll note that in this particular planner, classroom spaces was left out of it because individual classroom spaces don't really apply to what the school is trying to achieve in the team meeting. Now, hallway spaces were left in, and this is an optional thing. It may be that a school would prefer to not have the whole school discuss hallway spaces and just leave it up to individual groups of teachers or individuals to set up their own little spot throughout the school. So that would be a matter of preference. But what is important is that if you are wanting teachers to plan outdoor spaces, that again, they have the planning tools to do so. And so you'll note that in that column, it says outdoor spaces. So teachers could, before the meeting, maybe brainstorm a few ideas of where they think they would ideally like to set up based on objectives that they would be trying to meet. And then in the bottom, I divided it between hallway and outdoor. But again, that hallway space could be eliminated if the school didn't want to take a whole school approach in planning out hallway spaces. And in the outdoor space during the meeting, teachers would come to a consensus of who is going to set up what materials where. They could also, during the meeting, discuss where some overlaps may be between different grade levels. They might be thinking, okay, well, the grade 2s are covering similar inquiries or might have similar goals to what the grade 3s or 4s are trying to achieve, and maybe they can collaboratively plan a space together. So things can shift in that direction during the meeting. And then the last thing that's included on this planner is space to note observations. So again, at the next team meeting, teachers can come together and discuss which spaces worked well, which spaces didn't, how things are evolving, where student inquiries are going, and how things need to shift in the outdoor spaces. And by including all staff members in these meetings, then you've got a whole school approach that includes the mainstream teachers, your specialist teachers, and support staff in truly creating an environment for the students where the environment is the third teacher. Aside from helping the school meet its supporting goals, what are the other benefits of creating planners such as these to support a framework or the school's vision? Well, firstly, in doing so, you're going to end up with a unified staff because each person is aware of their role and each person has got a planning tool that's going to allow them to meet the school's vision in the same manner. The next benefit is that you're going to end up with empowered teachers because there's no confusion. There is a clear process outlined for how teachers should be thinking when setting up their classrooms. They're also empowered because a lot of times what happens when a school is interested in implementing a play-based approach where the environment is the teacher, teachers get a little bit lost because their concern is making a classroom that looks good, that looks engaging for the students. But then as the students are engaging with each space, teachers actually haven't fully thought out about which objectives are being met. But because these planners are objectives-based, there's no guesswork. The teacher knows in advance exactly why each space was created and what objectives they're hoping the students achieve through their interactions. So when that learning is demonstrated, when the student demonstrates that skill, the teacher knows it without question and can document it. So in this way, the teacher is truly empowered. And then lastly, it improves student learning. Because you've got a consistent approach by all teachers, whether they be mainstream, specialist, or support staff, the students are aware of this. They can see this as they're moving from class to class, and their connections therefore are tightened. Also, they know the expectations when they're moving from space to space as to how they should engage with them, and also they sort of build this confidence as they're moving throughout the school of what's available to them to assist them in their learning and their discoveries as they're interacting with their environment. As mentioned earlier, the goal of this video was merely to explore some different planner designs that a school could use in order to achieve its supporting goal of ensuring that the environment becomes a third teacher. These designs are by no means the only way. This video also did not explore what an educational framework would look like that would accompany or go alongside these planners. And it also didn't explore ways that planners such as these could connect to the framework. For more information on this and other topics related to ensuring that a school can achieve its goal of ensuring that the environment becomes the third teacher, you can visit my website, www.shalabooks.com. There you'll find the education blog where I've written several articles on topics that relate to these ones. And you can also purchase my book via the website, Empowering the Educator Within, which also covers different framework and planner designs and discusses ways things can be. If you feel like you need some additional help in designing your planners, feel free to contact me through the website. I'm always happy to help. Thanks for joining us today. Tune in next time for another episode of Empowering the Educator Within.